So, what is the problem with Jordan Peterson? Personally speaking, I think that he has certain points, some important points that he's making, and he's pretty decent at personality psychology and also at these gender differences. I think he has some good points when it comes to dominance hierarchies and some of the other stuff that he's teaching. Now, I also equally so, even though I think that there is good with Jordan Peterson, I think that he is in certain areas literally full of crap, and he's actually dangerous for people to listen to. Dangerous how? He's dangerous because you don't get another perspective. You think that everything that he says is true because he can scientifically prove it. But Jordan Peterson cannot scientifically prove everything that he's saying, and that's what people don't understand. He is you see, science has grown to become a modern religion where scientists effectively they are modern priests. They are like dogmas. If a study shows something, that means it's true, right? It's science, right? It's equal to like 800 years ago. If a priest says something, it must be true, right? Because the priest understands the Bible, and I don't understand the Bible, so I need to believe what the priest says. In the same sense, science has become a modern religion, with scientists being priests. Now, the problem with that is that science is very ambiguous. You have many different schools of thought, and they conflict with each other. You have a set of theories or research studies that shows one reality. Then you have another body of research that completely contradicts that. Who is right and who is wrong? Well, you don't really know that. It depends on what school of thought you have. Um, Now, Jordan Peterson doesn't show you the various different schools of thoughts in that way that I think he should be, to show that the conclusions that he comes to are actually very ambiguous. It's not really set in stone in the sense that he makes it look like. And that's a very big problem because you sort of believe I sort of believe what Jordan Peterson says because I'm not a professor in psychology. I can't rebuke that. I don't know the research. I can't check and actually see if what he's saying is true or not. I just have to take his word for it. Now, the second problem is the age we are living in right now, because we are living in the modern sort of McDonald's age, I call it. I call it the McDonald's age because we want fast food for everything. We want fast knowledge. We want fast tips. We don't actually want to learn things the hard way. We want to sort of get shortcuts. We want to look at a 10-minute long video and now we understand psychology. We want to look at a 10-minute long video and now we understand the relationships, or a 10-minute long video and we understand politics. It's not like that. It's more complex than that. You actually need to read and study and find out and listen to different types of people. But people always want the shortcut. And that creates a world where the popular people are the ones who effectively speak the truth, or people believe that the more popular something is, the more true it is, because popular people are always good at communicating. They're good at sort of packaging their teachings in a nice way, in an interesting way, and so on. So just because Jordan Peterson has millions of followers doesn't mean that he's more right than any other professor in psychology. You see? And the third problem also is that he comes in a time where the power of the Western world is diminishing. We're seeing the rise of China, the rise of India, the rapid economic development in Latin America and Africa. We are seeing a lot of foreigners who used to be in the Western world in low-skilled jobs. They are coming up higher up in the hierarchy. And that creates a sort of counter reaction in the Western world that, hey, stop. We don't want this anymore. We want things the way it used to be. And this is not for all people, but for some people it creates this sort of, wait, let's go back to the old days where we actually were controlling everything. And that creates popularity among Donald Trump and, Brexit and all of these right-wing stuff that basically wants to go back to the old days where the West basically could do whatever the hell they wanted and everyone else just had to follow. So these three factors lead, in my opinion, to a very large popularity for Jordan Peterson and people like that. Now, what are the, some of the big problems I have with his teachings? Well, first of all, it's IQ. To me, it's really surprising that people who claim to be intelligent can actually come up with such a silly and stupid measure for the human psyche to sort of reduce the potential of the psyche to one number. And so basically, what are they called, these Raven's matrices, where you look at like different sort of frames, and within those frames there are circles and squares, and they move in a certain way, and then the fifth one is supposed to have moved in a certain way, and if you're intelligent you can figure out the way the author of the test thinks that the squares and circles should move, because it's logical to him, and there's only one way to be logical. So you should basically think like him, and then you're intelligent. You see, why is that silly? Because in reality, you don't have 5 squares, 4 rectangles, and 3 triangles to work with. You have an infinite amount of possibilities, infinite amount of variables, infinite amount of right and wrong answers. How I would sort of define intelligence is more like the person who actually has the ability to abstract and choose what is important and what is not, and create a solution based on infinite amount of possibilities, a solution that leads to a reasonable outcome. But how can you measure that with Raven's matrices? And how can you reduce human beings just to one number? So there's one way of thinking. Of course, there are psychologists that reject the notion of IQ. There are theories of multiple intelligences. Now, does Jordan Peterson talk about that? No, he doesn't. You see, he shows one picture, and he teaches it as the truth. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, I think he has mentioned that the most intelligent people he knows is Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche. Carl Jung was a racist. Friedrich Nietzsche was also a racist. Now, I think they were very affected by the times they were living in, because during those times you had this race biology and so on. So I don't really know how racist they would have been if they would have lived today, but they have written racist things. Carl Jung, in this book called The Psychology of the Unconscious, he calls basically black people, or Negroes as he words it, an inferior race, when he talks about fantastic thinking and directive thinking. So the inferior races and children, such as Negroes, have fantastic thinking. That's what he writes. I find that quite funny and contradictory by Carl Jung, because basically all of Carl Jung's teachings comes from ancient Egypt. Dream analysis, well, the Egyptians have done that for thousands of years. That's nothing new. Symbolism is the same thing. Archetypes is an idea that first came from Plato, and Plato studied ancient Egypt. The unconscious, well, everything about meditation and that kind of thing is about tapping into the unconscious. You see, how intelligent is Carl Jung really? Well, he's a brilliant guy, but he takes a lot of stuff from ancient knowledge and rebrands it and puts his name on it. And then he calls it analytical psychology or psychoanalysis or something like that. But that's things that have been practiced for thousands of years. Anyways, say that we would actually follow Carl Jung. Why does Jordan Peterson not teach everything that Carl Jung taught? Carl Jung taught a lot about personality types. Carl Jung's Personality theory is probably the most famous personality theory that exists today. Yet Jordan Peterson is a personality psychologist, but he never mentions Carl Jung's, what is it, introverted intuition, extroverted thinking, introverted feeling. He never mentions Carl Jung's psychological types. Hmm? Also, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about empirical evidence, like in the debate with Katie Newman, which I think actually Katie Newman won. It's just that Katie Newman might be a little bit agreeable as a person, so that when Jordan Peterson starts with his assertiveness, she sort of shuts in. But as far as I'm concerned, Katie Newman raised a point that Jordan Peterson did not know how to answer.
Female traits, though, why are they not
feminine traits?
Why are they not desirable at the top of feminine traits? Why are they not desirable at the top of business?
It's hard to say. I'm just laying out the empirical evidence. Like we know the traits that predict success.
But we also know, because companies by and large have not been dominated by women over the centuries, we have nothing to compare it to. It's an experiment.
True, and it could be the case that if companies modified their behavior and became more feminine, that they would be successful. But there's no evidence for it.
So Jordan Peterson says that female traits don't predict success. And to me, that's like a completely ridiculous argument to make. It's like saying that, well, if you were a Jew in Nazi Germany in 1938, Jewishness would not predict success. Well, of course not. I mean, you're living in a world that has certain values in it, and those values are what predicts success. And we have been living in the Western world for a very long time. So being a Western, usually white man, this does not apply to all white men. I'm talking about white man as an archetype. So being a white man is what predicts success in the Western world. Of course, if you look at statistics or make a regression analysis of it, you're going to find that typical white male traits predict success. IQ to that level that you can actually measure IQ, and IQ has been something that have been valued in the Western world. Of course, it will look like it predicts success in data. But what Katie Newman raised, and what I will also raise, is we don't know what traits would predict success in a new world. Say that we change that. Say that we change our value system and actually start valuing agreeableness. Personally, when I lead, I actually value female traits. I think agreeableness is very nice to have. I don't want to work with disagreeable people. Now, I don't want to work necessarily with two agreeable people either, but I don't like disagreeable people. So we don't know how a world would look like if we would actually have other values that we value, such as being compassionate, being empathetic, being agreeable, being nice, being a good person. What would predict success then? You see, we don't know that. And that's what Katie Newman raised. And when Jordan Peterson sort of was in that situation, he sort of mumbled through and said, yeah, but he's just looking at the data. Yeah, but how is it going to be, Jordan Peterson? When are you going to look at data and when you're not going to look at data? Because you also teach Jungian archetypes. Carl Jung's archetypes. Can you prove that in data? What's the empirical evidence? What's the correlation coefficient for Jungian archetypes and whatever? There is no proof. You talk about Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche. Well, how do you prove your interpretation of Thus Spoke Zarathustra? You can't prove it. You sort of just intuitively see it. So on the one hand, you teach things that are not provable in data. On the other hand, when it comes to female traits, you resort all the way back to data. So which one is it? And this is the point. Jordan Peterson is so much more subjective than he claims, because I would actually be fine with almost everything that Jordan Peterson does if he would just be more open and honest with the fact that he is being subjective and he is having his own opinion and he's making his own political point. not put science on top of that, and not teach theories of multiple intelligences, not actually tell the truth about where dream analysis came from, or showing like a broader how could you say, like a broader perspective on the things that he's actually teaching, showing different schools of thought. You see? If you want to be scientific, you actually have to tell the whole truth. You can't just cherry pick which truths you tell and which you don't tell, because all personality psychologists don't hate postmodernism. All personality psychologists don't think that IQ is the best measure that exists. He might think that, and it's fine if he thinks that, but then he should also make it very clearly that it is his opinion, and not put science on top of it so that it becomes like a dogma that this is how it is and this you cannot question.